So, are you ready to dive into the world of AI frameworks?
Always ready to geek out about AI.
Me too, especially when we're talking about like the big leagues,
Yeah, right.
This is like the battle of the titans, PyTorch versus TensorFlow.
Yeah, it's a classic matchup, kind of like choosing between, joining the Avengers or the Justice League.
Totally. Both have their own strengths, their own style, and a huge fan base.
Right. Like hardcore fans.
Exactly. So we rolled up our sleeves, we dug into this awesome blog post comparing these two powerhouses.
Yeah, let's break it down.
By the end of this, you'll be dropping knowledge bombs at your next tech meetup.
For sure.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you'll actually understand what makes these tools tick.
Absolutely. Okay, so first up, PyTorch. This one's been like a rocket ship in the AI world. Our research showed it came from Facebook, or Meta now, I guess. But what's really cool is how fast it's become everyone's favorite, especially researchers.
It's true. That blog post really hammered home PyTorch's reputation as being super research friendly.
Okay, so what does research friendly even mean in this context?
So imagine you're a scientist. You're testing out a brand new hypothesis. You need tools that are adaptable, right? You have to experiment, quickly change directions if something isn't working. That's where PyTorch shines.
It's almost like a digital notepad where you can just throw ideas down, erase and redraw without a fuss.
Exactly. And the secret sauce behind all this flexibility is something called a dynamic computation graph.
Okay.
Unlike other frameworks that use static graphs, PyTorch builds its graphs on the fly as your code runs.
That sounds pretty hardcore, but is it really that big of a deal?
It totally changes the game. For example, remember that article mentioned RNNs, recurrent neural network?
Oh, yeah. Those are used everywhere in natural language processing, like when you're dealing with sequences of data, like sentences.
Right. And just so everyone's on the same page, RNNs are basically neural networks built for anything sequential. Text, stock prices, you name it.
Perfect.
So sentences, they don't all come in one size, right? With a static graph, you'd have to predefine the maximum length and pad out the shorter ones. Super inefficient.
That doesn't sound very elegant.
No, not at all. But PyTorch, with its dynamic graph, it just rolls with the punches. Adapts to different sequence lengths without breaking a sweat. Way smoother.
Okay, I'm starting to see why researchers love this thing.
Oh yeah, it's a game changer.
So in our boxing match, it sounds like PyTorch just landed a solid jab for agility and flexibility.
For sure. But every good fight needs a worthy opponent, right? That's where TensorFlow comes in.
Okay, so we've got PyTorch, the agile, quick on its feet contender.
Right.
And now we've got TensorFlow.
Yeah.
This is like the seasoned heavyweight champ, wouldn't you say? Backed by Google, they've got a bit of experience with AI, don't they?
I've been around the block a few times.
To say the least. Big scale projects. That's their bread and butter.
It shows, especially when you're talking about actually using these models in the real world. Like deploying them. That's where their experience shines.
It's one thing to build a model. It's another thing to actually make it work for millions of users.
Exactly. And the blog post we looked at, they highlighted TensorFlow Serving and TensorFlow Lite as being really important for that.
Can you unpack those a little bit? What are they and why do they matter so much in the TensorFlow world?
Okay, so imagine this. You've trained this awesome AI model, right?
Let's say it can translate languages.
Perfect. Or maybe it identifies objects in pictures.
Yeah.
But now you want to share it with the world.
Get it out there on a website or an app so everyone can use it.
Exactly. That's what TensorFlow Serving is for. It helps you take that model, package it up, and make it easy for anyone to access.
So it's like taking something from your workbench and putting it on display for the whole world to use.
Exactly. Then you've got TensorFlow Lite, and that's all about bringing AI to smaller devices, like your phone, maybe even wearables, things that don't have the horsepower of a huge server.
So TensorFlow Lite takes that powerful AI model and creates a mini version of it, one that can run smoothly on something as small as a smartwatch.
Yep, exactly. Shrinks it down.
So back to our boxing match. TensorFlow definitely seems to have the edge when we talk about real-world use, deploying on a large scale.
I'd agree with that. Although PyTorch isn't just sitting around, they're building up their toolkit too, making it better for deployment all the time.
Oh yeah, PyTorch is hungry. They want that championship belt.
Definitely ambitious.
But before we declare a winner, we've got to talk about the people writing the code.
Of course, the developers.
Right, because it doesn't matter how powerful the tools are if they're impossible to use.
Totally agree. And this is where things get pretty interesting. That blog post we mentioned, they really emphasized how developer-friendly PyTorch is. Specifically, how well it works with Python.
Because Python is like the go-to language for AI, right?
Oh, sure.
So if you're fluent in Python, PyTorch is going to feel pretty natural.
Yeah, you can just jump right in and start coding, express your ideas without having to wrestle with the language itself. Now, TensorFlow has been making progress here. They've got this thing called eager execution.
Right, I've heard of that.
Makes it a bit more intuitive. But if you're coming from a Python background, TensorFlow might still seem a bit tougher to learn. Like you're learning a new dialect or something.
So it might take some extra time to get up to speed.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the core frameworks, what they're good at. But what about all the extra stuff, the tools and libraries that surround them, their ecosystems?
Like you've got your boxing gloves, that's the framework. But then you need a good training regimen, the right coach.
Maybe a lucky robe.
Exactly. The ecosystem is everything else that helps you get the most out of those gloves.
So what kind of training regimen, what kind of lucky robes does TensorFlow have in its corner? So TensorFlow, what's in its training camp? What gives it that extra edge?
First up, you've got TensorBoard.
Okay, tell me more.
This is like having a super high-tech analysis of your model's every move.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
You can visualize its performance, you can track all the important metrics, even peek inside and see how it's making decisions.
So it's like being able to analyze every single punch, every block, every step of your AI fighter, all in slow motion.
Exactly. You can see where it excels, where it might be tripping up. It's incredibly powerful.
That's amazing. And I'm guessing this level of insight is super valuable when you're talking about optimizing performance.
Absolutely. Then there's TensorFlow Hub. Think of it as a giant library, but instead of books, it's full of pre-trained AI models.
Wow, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time?
Exactly. You can grab a model that someone else has already trained, maybe it's for image recognition or natural language processing, and you can just plug it into your own project.
It's like having a shortcut, a head start.
Exactly. And again, this plays into TensorFlow's strength in taking things from development to deployment. They've built this ecosystem that makes the whole process smoother.
It's like they've got the infrastructure all set up from training to getting your AI out there in the real world.
Precisely. Now, on the PyTorch side, their ecosystem is younger, definitely.
It's still evolving, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's growing incredibly fast.
Mm-hmm.
The blog post we looked at highlighted a couple of their tools. One is Torch Vision.
Okay. I've heard whispers of Torch Vision.
It's like a goldmine for anyone working with computer vision.
So images, videos, that kind of thing.
Yep. Pre-trained models, data sets, all ready to go specifically for that kind of work.
Yeah.
Then you've got PyTorch Lightning, and this one's all about making your life easier as a developer.
Always a good thing.
Right. It streamlines your code, helps you build models that are more scalable and easier to train.
So it's like having a super efficient training regimen that gets your AI fighter in top shape without all the hassle.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how quickly researchers are embracing these PyTorch tools.
It's like they're drawn to that ease of use, that flexibility. Makes sense. PyTorch has that reputation.
It does.
Okay, so we've got these two powerhouses, each with their own advantages, their own style. For someone who's just starting out in the AI world, what's the takeaway here? Which one should they choose?
That's the big question, right?
Oh.
The good news is there's no wrong answer. It truly depends on what you want to achieve, what you're comfortable with.
It's like, are you going for a light jog or are you climbing Mount Everest?
Perfect analogy. You need the right gear for the job. Now, one thing that really struck me in that blog post was how these two frameworks might actually be kind of converging.
Really? Like they're becoming more similar.
In a way, yeah. TensorFlow is getting more user-friendly, more research-oriented with some of its updates. And PyTorch is putting more effort into the production side of things.
So they're kind of learning from each other, taking inspiration from each other's strengths.
It seems that way. And it makes you wonder, what's next? Will we see some kind of hybrid framework down the line? One that takes the best of both worlds.
Now that would be a game changer. A framework that's both adaptable for research and robust enough for large-scale deployments, something that can transition seamlessly.
Imagine the possibilities. And on top of that, AI itself is constantly evolving. New approaches, new ideas all the time.
It's like a constant back and forth, this evolution of ideas.
Exactly. And both TensorFlow and PyTorch are playing a huge role in pushing those boundaries, shaping the future of AI as a whole.
So no matter which framework you choose, it's an exciting time to be involved in this field.
Couldn't agree more.
And who knows, maybe one of our listeners will be the one to create the next big AI framework, taking inspiration from these giants.
That would be incredible.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of PyTorch and TensorFlow. Hopefully you're feeling a little more informed, a little more inspired. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those big questions, and most importantly, keep learning.